What if I told you that every time someone hurts you and you react, you're actually giving them a psychological victory they desperately crave? Stay with me, because what Carl Jung discovered about human behavior will completely change how you handle conflict forever. Carl Jung said something that will shake you to your core: everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But here's what most people miss: when someone attacks you, they're not really attacking you at all. What they're actually doing is far more sinister, and once you understand this psychological mechanism, you'll never fall into their trap again. According to Carl Jung, every person carries what he called the shadow, the dark, repressed parts of themselves they refuse to acknowledge. These are their fears, their insecurities, their unhealed wounds, and their deepest shame. And here's the psychological twist that changes everything. When someone lashes out at you, they're projecting their shadow onto you. Carl Jung discovered that projection is one of the most powerful psychological defenses humans use. Instead of facing their own pain, they throw it onto others. They make you the villain in their story so they don't have to be the hero who faces their own demons. But here's where it gets really interesting, and this will explain why some people seem to target you specifically. When someone hurts you, they're often seeing their own reflection in you. That criticism they're throwing your way, it's actually their own self-criticism. That judgment they're passing, it's the judgment they pass on themselves every day. Carl Jung understood that we tend to attack in others what we secretly hate about ourselves. According to Carl Jung, this phenomenon occurs because the unconscious mind cannot distinguish between self and other when it comes to these repressed qualities. The person attacking you is literally fighting their own inner demons, but they've externalized the battle by making you the enemy. This is why your reaction matters so much. When you respond emotionally, when you defend, explain, or fight back, you're not just protecting yourself. You're validating their projection. You're saying, yes, I am what you think I am. You're stepping into their psychological drama and playing exactly the role they need you to play. Carl Jung discovered something even more disturbing about this process, and understanding this will protect you from manipulation forever. Carl Jung discovered something profound about human psychology: your emotional reaction is the prize thereafter. When someone attacks you, insults you, or tries to tear you down, they're fishing. They're casting a line into your emotional waters, waiting for you to bite. And here's what will blow your mind: most people take the bait every single time, never realizing they're being psychologically manipulated. According to Carl Jung, this manipulation works because it activates what he called our complexes, those emotional patterns formed in childhood that get triggered in adult relationships. When someone pushes your buttons, they're not just annoying you in the moment. They're activating old wounds, ancient programming, childhood trauma that has nothing to do with them. Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This means that when you react automatically to someone's attack, you're not responding from your adult self, you're responding from your wounded child. But here's the psychological truth that changes everything, and most people never discover this in their entire lifetime. Carl Jung understood that happy, fulfilled people don't go around trying to destroy others. Secure people don't need to tear others down to feel better about themselves. The person who hurts you is usually fighting a battle within themselves, and they want you to join them in their misery. According to Carl Jung, misery truly does love company, but not for the reasons most people think. It's not just about feeling better by bringing others down. It's about psychological validation. When they can make you react with anger, pain, or defensiveness, they've proven to themselves that their internal narrative is correct, that the world is hostile, that people are against them, that their victim mentality is justified. What if I told you there's a way to break this cycle completely? What if you could render their attacks powerless with one simple psychological technique that Carl Jung discovered? Carl Jung discovered that the most powerful response to someone's attack isn't a counterattack, it's complete withdrawal of your energy from their drama. He called this withdrawing the projection. Here's how it works: when you don't react, when you don't defend, when you don't explain, you break their psychological pattern. You refuse to be the mirror for their shadow. You force them to sit with their own reflection, and that's something most people can't handle. According to Carl Jung, this is when real power is revealed, but not in the way you might think. Your silence becomes a mirror that reflects their behavior back to them. Without your reaction to distract them, they're forced to confront their own actions. They have to face what they're really doing and why they're doing it. And for most people, that's terrifying. Carl Jung understood that projection only works when someone is willing to carry your shadow for you. When you refuse to carry their emotional baggage, when you hand it back to them through your non-reaction, something powerful happens. They either have to deal with their own stuff or find someone else to project onto. But here's where most people get it completely wrong, and this mistake costs them their psychological freedom. They think not reacting means being passive, weak, or doormat-like. That's not what Carl Jung meant at all. True psychological strength, according to Jung, is the ability to remain centered when everything around you is chaos. It's the capacity to witness someone's pain without absorbing it, to see their attack without internalizing it. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And becoming who you truly are requires distinguishing between your authentic self and the roles others want you to play in their psychological dramas. According to Carl Jung, there's a split second that can change your entire life, and I'm about to show you exactly how to harness it. Carl Jung discovered that our reactions are rarely about the present moment, they're about our past wounds, our childhood programming, our unresolved trauma. When someone triggers you, they're not just pushing your buttons. They're activating old emotional patterns that have been running your life from the shadows. This is why the pause is so powerful, and in just a moment, I'll show you exactly how to use it to reclaim your psychological freedom. According to Carl Jung, that split second before you react is where your freedom lives. In that moment, you get to choose, will you respond from your wound, or will you respond from your wisdom? Will you react from your past programming, or will you respond from your present awareness? Carl Jung called this moment the transcendent function, the psychological space where conscious and unconscious meet, where you can choose your response instead of being driven by automatic patterns. But here's the psychological truth that will change your life forever, and this goes against everything society teaches us about conflict. The person who can remain calm in the face of provocation holds all the power in the room. Not because they're suppressing their emotions, but because they're choosing how to express them. They're responding from their adult self, not their wounded child. According to Carl Jung, this is what he called individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, separate from other people's projections, expectations, and emotional manipulations. When you stop reacting to every hurt, every insult, every betrayal, you start living from your authentic self rather than your defensive self. Carl Jung discovered that individuation is the ultimate goal of human psychological development. It's not about becoming perfect, it's about becoming whole. It's about integrating all parts of yourself, including your shadow, so that you're no longer at the mercy of unconscious patterns. This leads us to a paradox that Carl Jung identified, and understanding this will revolutionize how you handle difficult people. Carl Jung said something that will revolutionize how you handle difficult people: what you resist persists. This means that when you fight against someone's negativity, when you argue with their perception, when you try to convince them they're wrong, you're actually feeding the very thing you're trying to stop. Your resistance gives their attack energy. Your defense validates their offense. And here's the psychological trap most people never see coming. According to Carl Jung, when you explain yourself to someone who's attacking you, you're actually justifying their accusation. You become trapped in their psychological web, dancing to their emotional tune. You give them exactly what they want: your emotional energy, your time, your mental space. Carl Jung discovered that this creates what psychologists call a trauma bond, a psychological connection formed through repeated cycles of conflict and resolution. The person who hurts you becomes psychologically significant to you, not because you like them, but because they've hijacked your emotional system. But here's what Carl Jung understood about breaking free from this cycle, and this strategy will feel counterintuitive at first. The escape route is complete psychological disengagement. Not the cold, bitter kind of disengagement that comes from hurt. The wise, intentional kind that comes from understanding. When you realize that their behavior is about them, not you, something fundamental shifts in your psyche. Carl Jung understood that people reveal who they are by how they treat others, especially when they think no one is watching. When someone hurts you, they're showing you their character, their level of consciousness, their emotional maturity. That's valuable information, not about you, but about them. According to Carl Jung, when you stop taking things personally, you gain what he called psychological objectivity, the ability to see situations clearly without the distortion of your own emotional reactions. This brings us to the questions that will literally rewire your brain's response to conflict. Carl Jung discovered that the questions we ask ourselves determine the quality of our psychological experience. Instead of asking, "Why did they do this to me?" Carl Jung would recommend asking, what does this behavior reveal about their inner world? This shift in questioning will literally rewire your brain's response to conflict, but there's more. Instead of wondering, how can I make them understand, ask yourself, what am I trying to prove by explaining myself? According to Carl Jung, this second question reveals something profound about your own psychological needs. Carl Jung said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. When you find yourself desperate to explain your worth to someone who's attacking you, you're revealing that part of you agrees with their assessment. You're showing that your self-worth is still dependent on external validation. Here's the truth that will set you free, according to Carl Jung, and this might be hard to hear at first. You don't need anyone's permission to know your own worth. Carl Jung understood that the opinions of others are like weather, constantly changing, rarely accurate, and completely outside your control. When you base your self-worth on how others treat you, you're building your psychological house on shifting sand. But when you learn to remain unmoved by other people's emotional storms, you become like a mountain, solid, grounded, unshakable. Their words become wind, their actions become rain, but you remain standing. Carl Jung discovered that this unshakable quality comes from what he called self-realization, knowing yourself so deeply that external opinions cannot destabilize your inner foundation. This leads us to a crucial distinction that separates emotionally mature people from everyone else. According to Carl Jung, most people mistake defensive behavior for strength. They think being loud, aggressive, or reactive shows confidence. But Carl Jung discovered that real confidence is quiet. It doesn't need to prove itself because it knows itself. This is what separates emotionally mature people from everyone else, and once you understand this distinction, you'll never be manipulated again. True confidence, according to Carl Jung, doesn't need to react because it has nothing to prove. It doesn't need to defend because it's not under attack, it recognizes that the attack is really about the attacker's inner world, not the target's worth. Carl Jung said, your vision becomes clear when you look into your heart. Who looks outside, dreams, who looks inside, awakens. When you stop looking outside for validation and start looking inside for truth, you become psychologically invincible. According to Carl Jung, this inner knowing is what he called the self, the integrated, whole version of yourself that exists beyond the ego's need for approval or defense. But here's what happens when you truly embody this principle, and this is where the real transformation begins. When someone tries to hurt you and you don't react, you're not being weak, you're being wise. You're not being passive, you're being powerful. You're not avoiding conflict, you're choosing peace. And according to Carl Jung, this choice is what separates evolved human beings from those still trapped in unconscious patterns. Carl Jung discovered that evolution isn't just biological, it's psychological. The next stage of human development is the ability to remain conscious in the face of unconscious attacks. This brings us to Carl Jung's ultimate insight about psychological freedom, and this will change everything about how you navigate relationships. Carl Jung discovered that psychological maturity isn't about winning fights, it's about choosing which battles deserve your energy. He understood that your peace is more valuable than their understanding. Your mental clarity is more important than their approval. Your emotional freedom is more precious than their validation. According to Carl Jung, when you stop reacting to every provocation, something profound happens to your consciousness. You reclaim your psychological sovereignty. You become the author of your own emotional experience rather than a character in someone else's drama. You stop being a puppet in their psychological theater. Carl Jung said, the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. But here's the key, you get to choose what kind of transformation occurs. You can choose to be transformed by wisdom rather than by wounds. According to Carl Jung, this is what he called conscious living, making deliberate choices about your responses instead of being driven by unconscious patterns. The next time someone hurts you, remember this psychological truth from Carl Jung, and this single insight can change your entire life. They're not just trying to wound you, they're trying to control you. Your reaction is their victory. Your silence is your strength. Your peace is your power. Don't give them what they want. Give yourself what you need, psychological freedom, emotional sovereignty, and the unshakable knowledge that you are not what they say you are. You are who you choose to be in response to what they do. And that choice, according to Carl Jung, is where your real power lives. Carl Jung discovered that the ultimate human freedom is the freedom to choose your response to any situation. No one can take that away from you unless you give it away through unconscious reactions. But here's Carl Jung's final insight that will stay with you long after this ends. According to Carl Jung, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And who you truly are is not someone who needs to defend themselves against every attack, explain themselves to every critic, or prove themselves to every doubter. You are someone who knows their worth, protects their peace, and chooses their battles wisely. You are someone who has learned the ultimate psychological skill, the ability to remain yourself in the face of others' unconsciousness. If this exploration of Carl Jung's psychological insights has opened your eyes to new possibilities for how you handle difficult people, there's so much more to discover about the hidden patterns that govern human behavior. The psychology that can transform your relationships and your life is waiting to be explored. Subscribe to continue this journey of psychological awakening, because your future self will thank you for the wisdom you gained today.